and hurrah for the life of the country girl, and to ramble in the new mown hay. In spring we sow, at the harvest mow, and that's how the seasons round they go. But of all the times, if choose I may, I'll be rambling in the new mown hay. For I like to rise when the sun she's rising early in the morning, and I like to hear the small birds singing merrily upon their leylands, and hurrah for the life of a country girl, and to ramble in the new mown hay. Things that are near and dear to my heart. I learned about leadership and so many other things about rural community from Jane Farwell, and I owe her a debt for everything I've become in the third year, however long, many years it's been since. I see familiar faces, those people who were my first friends here. Sarah, Twyla, the Buettners, Cecilia, Glenn. You were my neighbors, and we're still all here. This is a special night for me also because the Friends of Folklore Village decided to choose the theme of women farmers and how they keep their communities together and support rural communities and keep them strong. Right now, 31% of American farmers are women. It's about 43% in Wisconsin, and it's grown 10% in the last 10 years. Many times we think that farmers are all men, but they're not. In fact, if you look at the worldwide, 70% of the world's farmers are women. The group I belong to is not a formal group, the Soil Sisters of Wisconsin. Any of you who live on the land can be a soil sister, whether you have a vegetable garden or a 1,000-acre crop farm. What it means is that we nurture our earth, we nurture our children, we nurture our communities, and we do it through the songs and the stories and the 4-H and the cakes we bake, the churches we go to, and the role we take in our communities as leaders on our town boards, our county government, and our state government. So welcome. I'm really glad you're here. I have a few announcements. Feel free to get up and get more food or drinks as we go through the evening. We won't have a formal intermission. We will have some breaks to sell raffle tickets and do some things like that. And we will have some song breaks. But feel free to get up and move around if you need to. There is a raffle. You saw the 4 baskets, as you came, or 3 baskets, one really lovely cake from Gail Van Heeren. So please feel free to buy those raffle tickets. We have storytellers all the way from Lone Rock, Arena, to Monroe, to Dayton, to Dodgeville, to Ridgeway, and all points in between, Blanchardville. There are a few people I'd like to thank for the slides of the Soil Sisters. Thank Lisa Kivrist with the In Her Boots workshops through Moses Organic Farming. Lisa Johnson provided the music, as did Point 5 from Mineral Point, where our Megan Dudley is the fiddler. And then, of course, if you heard him, there was Greg Brown in there too. Our first story, getting us off to the start, is from Cassie Nolterweiss. Sorry, Cassie. And her story is A Tale of Two Possums and Finding Balance. So Cassie.
Any animals of any kind, that's my job, because animals need grain and grain attracts rodents, right? So we know we have a problem right away because there is no way he's going to go in the pitch black and figure out what rodent or animal is killing this chicken. So I begged him, please, please, you could hear they're being killed, please can you go outside? So I get the kids back in bed, I tape up my toe, and I don't clean up any blood inside, and then I go outside to see what's going on. And my husband is standing on the porch, and he's got a headlamp on, and his face is completely drained of color. And he's managed to open up, it's a small chicken coop, again, we're vegetable farmers, right? So it's just 3 chickens, but it's open. And he's like, I just can't do anything. And I look at him and we're a little frustrated with each other because I can't do anything either. I've got a broken toe. And so this rodent, which you may have guessed now is a possum, completely disemboweled 1 chicken. The other ones were okay and survived miraculously. And later on, my husband live trapped the possum and he killed the possum with a .22, which was not a clean affair either. I'm sorry you're eating, this is terrible. So, the thing that you should know about me is that I'm mortified of killing things. That's one of those things as a farmer. I don't think anybody enjoys killing something, but I kind of freak out in the moment, and I never hit the thing hard enough the first time, if it's a rabbit or whatever, and then it kind of suffers, and then I'm like, oh God, I'm good. And I'm not good at it. But my husband, because he hates rodents, if it's, whatever it is cornered, you give him a shovel and that thing's done, because he's scared of them. So this whole thing was very messy, and it didn't go very well. It was the first possum we'd ever seen on our farm in 10 years. So it kind of stuck there, something that I remembered. And then the farming season that followed this first possum was also very ugly. It was a really hard season, and I should back up a little bit. It wasn't hard because of the weather or anything else. It was difficult between the relationship between my husband and I. And those of you who are in the farming and agricultural life, you may recognize that work life and personal life are intertwined in a very complicated way. And when there's a problem in one, there's a problem in another, and it's very hard to pull one little thread out of a problem without tugging on 17 other things and trying to reweave it. It can be very difficult. Usually our yin and yang is very good. My husband has a singular focus on a successful farm, and I share that passion, but I also have a focus on balance. So I'm always the voice being like, remember your family, you know. I work full-time on the farm, and through having 3 babies, either in my belly or on my back or needing to nurse, I still worked 40 hours a week at a minimum through every farm season with a lot of help. And in that yin and yang, we had this very tight balance where the farm at the end was his baby, and the babies were my babies. And when push came to shove, we knew without speaking whose responsibility certain things were. If there was tilling that had to be done because it was going to be raining and we had 17 different things that need to get in the field now, there was no question of who was going to do that tilling. That was my husband's job. But if there was a child that was hungry, or somebody needed to eat, or somebody's belly hurt, or somebody got a scratch, or the time my daughter had a rock in her head when the babysitter radios in, somebody's hurt, I'm the one who jumps away from the field and goes back to the home. And that's our yin and yang. But that season, the time with those little people kind of fading and my children not needing me the same way that they needed me, suddenly I wasn't okay with taking such a back seat on the farm where my husband was in control and he was making calls and calling the shots, and I was kind of a glorified employee. And I had been completely okay with that for years, for 8 years. As again, babies on bellies and backs and everywhere. But suddenly it didn't feel okay to me. But that feeling surprised me that season after the first possum. And just like the possum was very surprising and unexpected and a little ugly, so were those emotions that particular season. It was rough because neither of us really knew what was going on. We couldn't quite identify the feelings. And another thing about being a farmer is no matter what's going on, you generally can't handle anything changing unless it's wintertime. You can't reflect. You just are in the season and you have to just go. And any pivot, any changing, pretty much can't happen until the next circle comes around for the next season. So as the season sort of went on, things got a little more emotional and uglier. By the time we hit the winter, I sort of felt like the same way that chicken had been disemboweled, like so had the balance of what was going on in our farm relationship and our personal relationship. We talked it out. We came up with a plan of shifting certain responsibilities over to me so I could feel a little bit more empowered as being a female farmer. And we had a good plan. And we went through a season, and that transition went really well. And that it was the next winter that I saw the second possum, and the only other possum I've ever seen on our farm. And there one was again, right on the chicken coop. Luckily it was daylight, and I didn't have a broken toe anymore. And I had a plan. I was like, all right, I think we got this. So I radioed my husband, And again, remember, I'm scared of killing things, he's scared of rodents. We have a yin and a yang. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to take the shovel, I'm going to scare it and corner it, and I might be able to get one hit before my panic and fear kind of overtakes me and I become useless. Meanwhile, you're going to follow me while I do this because I know you're going to be useless until the thing is done. So I've got the shovel, and he's literally 20 feet behind me, all the color. I mean, this is a strong, bold man, but that's a possum, so all the color is drained out of his face. And so I do my job. It's burying its little teeth at me, and even when it's doing that, I'm like, oh, it's really kind of hard, you know. It's an animal, you know, but I get it cornered, I do my job, and then I have the shovel, and I turn and I look at it, and like two runners, you know, in a relay race, I kind of hand off the shovel, and with that, he is able to step forward with determination and courage, and I'm able to step back like, oh, you know, now my fear is completely overtaken because this death thing is about to happen. So he hits the possum once, and in that first hit, he killed the thing, but again, he's scared of rodents, so he hit it like maybe 5 more times. And I was like, oh, you know, so he's died. It's dead. So he scoops up the possum, and he's got it on a shovel now, and it's on his shoulder. And I'm thinking, we're done. You know, this is good. We did it. And I walk up to him, and I'm like, all right, we're doing. And then I stop talking, and I look at him, and all the color's drained out of his face again, and he's scared again. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, is it dead? And I look at him like, yeah, honey, nothing can survive what you just did to it. And he turns to me in all seriousness and goes, but possums play dead. So I tried really hard to keep my laughing inside because, you know, it was a real genuine fear, but it was hilarious, right? And I tell that part of the story a lot. But the part I don't tell is how I took the shovel from him and I said, all right, I got it. We kind of traded again because now he was scared. And as I walked out to the backfield with this dead possum on my shovel and walked past all of our vegetables and our whole operation, I just sort of knew it was all going to be okay.
That was so great, Cassie. It just gets us off to a wonderful, wonderful day of cold day of stories. My name is Madeline Uranek, and along with Pat Scogan and Sarah Wire, I'm one of the MCs of the program. But this is great. We have the next speaker is one of my favorite storytellers, because I've been a part of some of her stories. She lives down the road and over on 191. Sarah Wire came here first when she was 10 years old, and she was a member of the children's performing group at Folklore Village, and she hung in there until when she was 15, I think. We all got to go to the International Festival at Leiden, the Netherlands, and she was there. And now she's gone through all of the extension positions that there is, and she's ended up as the Iowa County 4-H coordinator, a new job, and so give her a warm welcome, and we are so glad.
So here's my story, if you give a girl a calf. If you give a girl a calf, she's going to ask for a halter. When you give her a halter, chances are she is going to ask you to help catch the calf. Once you catch the calf, you're going to need a tractor and a wagon to train it to lead. Then she's going to want to wash and clip the calf. When she gets ready to clip, chances are she's going to need the clippers. She'll ask you to get one that runs quiet and cool. When she's done fitting and training her calf, she'll want to take it to a dairy show. She'll probably ask you to go buy white pants to wear in front of the judge. She may even get a rhinestone belt to wear, just like the older girls do. When it's time to go to the show, she's going to need a truck and a trailer to haul it. You'll have to go to the neighbors and ask if you can borrow their trailer. During the summer, she's going to want to be a dairy princess with a crown and a sash, promoting great tasting cheese, chocolate, milk, and yogurt. Realizing she'll need to be in parades, she's going to ask you to get a convertible So you go to the auto dealer and ask if you can borrow a convertible. You'll drive her in parades and she'll wave to the crowds. When she's done promoting the dairy industry, it'll be time to take her calf to the Labor Day County Fair. She'll need you to bring fresh food every day to the fairgrounds. You'll walk behind her and her calf as they go to the show ring to keep it clean. She'll get a white ribbon in her class and a blue ribbon in showmanship. Thinking about next year's fair, she'll realize that calf's going to be grown up. Chances are she's going to ask for another calf. Thank you.
Oh, here we go. Okay, so my name is Joan Buettner Steele, and I grew up down the road on our family's dairy farm. And when I was a senior in college, I started a group with some friends, and we ended up singing in this a cappella quartet we named Navin. And I'm going to sing a song that we did with Navin that ties back to my farming days, because I always really liked this song, partly because it's about milking a cow. So I should just point out that my sisters are here today, and all of us really enjoyed singing as kids, and one of the main places we liked to sing was in the barn. We did a lot of fun making up songs about cows and that sort of thing. And if any of you, probably a lot of you, have been in dairy barns around here, one of the common practices is to leave a radio running. So it's a well-known fact. I actually think it's been studied, I've read this, that cows give more milk with certain kinds of music. So the song that I'm going to do is one that was recorded in the Scottish Hebrides, and the recording was of this woman actually milking her cow, so you could hear the milk hitting the pail as she was singing. So I'm sitting down because I want you to imagine that, you'd be on your milking stool. You probably lean your head forward a little bit, against the cow, and then this is someone who is milking by hand. Now, of course, today there are lots of equipment that you can use to milk cows, but this is recorded from back in 1951, but I don't know how old the song really is. It could have gone back quite a while. So, a brief translation. So the first verse, the calves have suckled, O gentle lady, all have suckled. The second verse is rosy-faced and smooth-cheeked, O gentle lady, you're my dear. And the third verse, so it's a very soothing song, persuading her to give more milk. Whiter than crowdy milk of the cow, O gentle lady, you're fairest of all. So this is, crowdy is fresh cheese. This is called a vanruktune. Ahu, aho, yoli. Ahu, aho, yoli. Ahu, aho, yoli. Avanruktune, yolental. Snuaros, screw high and ahoy. Snuaros, screw high and ahoy. Snuaros, screw high and ahoy. Avanruktune, stusmogra. Skillana grupa nabor, skillana grupa nabor, skillana grupa
Wilma was raised on a dairy farm near Dickeyville, Wisconsin. She and her husband, John, bought a beef and dairy farm in 1961 here near Dodgeville. This is where she raised chickens and 4 children, one of which I kind of palled around with in high school, and it's glad to see you here tonight. Wilma has volunteered over several decades reading to Head Start children in a program called Wisconsin Bookworms. In this program, she and her husband John, when he was alive, read books to the children, and at the end of each month, every child in the classroom got a book to take home and keep to start their own library. She also drives for the Out-of-County Commission on Aging. Wilma, would you please come up and tell us your story?
Hi, life on the farm. It seemed like every farm wife raised chickens. I had Leghorn roosters to feed the family, and I also had laying hens. And the old hen, when she got to be 3 years old, she would quit laying. So then I would advertise them as stewing hens, and older women would come out of Dodgeville and buy them from me. And it was great to get rid of them. I couldn't ever butcher a hen because she had been a faithful worker, and I just couldn't do it. But I had a young gal call me and she wanted 50 hens. I thought, wow, what an ambitious young lady she is. She came, we caught the chickens and had them all in the crate, ready to go, and she paid me. And then she says, I got a pet bobcat that won't eat nothing dead. When I get home, I'll throw one of these hens into her. My husband said, one look at my face, he knew what I was going to say, no deal. He hurried up and got her out of there. I had more eggs than what I could use, so I went and put an ad in the paper and I sold them for 45 cents a dozen and 3 dozen for $1.45, but one stopped. Well, that worked out good and I got quite a big egg route. And I was known around Dodgeville as the egg lady. So I said, if I die, you put my obituary in the paper. They don't know Wilma Doyle. They know me as the egg lady. About that time, I had a customer that had the gas station, and he had oil boxes that he got oil in. And that box would hold 20 dozen perfectly. So I would get empty boxes from him every week when I dropped eggs off, and they would come in handy. About that time, Don Q got going out north of Dodgeville, and they had Sunday brunch. And they would need 100 dozen eggs each Saturday. Well, I would get the eggs there for him. I put 40 dozen on the front seat beside me in these oil boxes, and another 60 dozen in the back seat. I didn't want to put them in the trunk. That was too heavy to lift up out. But I said to my husband, if you hear of a wreck going out to 23, bury me, car and all, with 100 dozen eggs, you wouldn't want to separate one from the other. By that time, I had my price up to 85 cents a dozen, and if I didn't have enough eggs, I would call other farm wives and pick up their extra eggs, and I would meet my quota. Well, then when I had pullets, that's young chickens raised, their eggs would be small. I couldn't take them to Quinn's. You couldn't expect them to crack those eggs. So I brought home mayonnaise jars, and I would crack my pullet eggs and fill these jars. I don't remember what I got for that, but I was getting 85 cents for the big eggs, so that was really a good deal. Always about once a week, my husband went back the manure spreader up to the chicken house, and I get one of my children. Mary didn't want a job, but one of my boys would help me clean out the hen house. We go into a scoop shovel and pitchfork, get a whole load on the manure spreader. Afterwards, my husband would bring over 2 bales of straw, and we'd pick them out and put them in the chicken house, and those chickens would be so happy, and they're scratching in that straw. And I would bed up the nest. I picked up my eggs in a 5-gallon bucket, take them to the house, and that way I would clean them up and put them in these egg carton boxes. We had an extra room on the end of the hen house, and he put a water tank in there, so he put the ground feed into the water tank, and all I had to do was scoop up the bucket of feed and fill the feeders. Well, I happened to notice I was getting tracks of rats in it. So we got some rat traps, and he helped me set them, and then we tied twine strings to them so they wouldn't run off with it with the one leg in it. Well, the first morning after we set them, I went in there, and there he was. And he looked at me with an evil eye. I ran to the barn to get my husband to do the dirty deed. Time we got back, he had pulled the foot out. So my husband said, you need something right now to do it, so he got me an axe handle. I found if you grit your teeth and swing, you can do it. About that time, the barn cats got used to coming up about that time for a good warm breakfast of a nice fat rat. After we quit with the hens, we'd raise roosters just so we could have meat. And we'd have these baby chicks in the hen house, and they'd be in there chicking away, and all little chicks do. Anyway, the cats would be circling the hen house, trying to get in there. And when you went in the door, you know how a cat's around your feet, trying to get in. We thought we had it good. We went in one time, and there she was, sitting in the pen. It wouldn't have been bad if she ate a couple for herself, but no, she had to kill a bunch. And then she's sitting there looking fat and contented. So then we made sure she wouldn't get in again, but next time, there she was. And we knew she didn't get in past us, and we looked all around the hen house. We couldn't see nothing. One of the air vents got off, and she climbed up on the roof and came down through. And so that is my story about my chickens. Thank you.
There were 10 of us, 11 of us. I was the middle kid. And you can imagine a household of 5 girls and 6 girls and 5 boys. It was a riot. Growing up in the farm was the wonderful way to have a childhood. We ran wild, barefoot, in neighbors' fields, woods, marshes, walked in creeks dangerously, and that type of thing. And later on, our mother said, you didn't know we were very worried about you, that you were going to hurt yourself or not come back. So I guess, good thing she didn't know all the stuff that we did. But I am a farmer's daughter, and I love to say that I'm a farmer's daughter. I hated it at age 16 because I wanted to get away, as far as away from the farm as I could. So I went to Chicago. And living in Chicago on the train going into Chicago was like, this is not for me. So I tag up and pack up and head to Wisconsin, back home. First kind of in Milwaukee and then back to Madison. So again, fortunate how things have passed, how it worked out. My career as a veterinary technician was very satisfying. At the vet school, we did incredibly interesting things. We did kidney transplants on cats. We did interesting types of new procedures, osteosarcoma in dogs. The study was actually the first is what they found for children. Children get osteosarcoma, which is bone cancer. So, okay, that's enough about the farm thing. So how did I get into politics? Well, it happens to be my father he was on the farm, and town chair at that time wanted to put a road straight through our farmland. Well, you don't tell a German that type of thing without some type of pushback. So he ended up running for office and won, and stopped that, and then subsequently ran for county board, and he won that. So here I am at the table now with all of us at the table talking about what's going on in government, local government, all the things that are happening in the county. Ho-chunk was a big thing at that point, as far as are they going to let it happen? So we just learned about that kind of stuff. But Dad was passionate. He could talk at the top of his lungs when he was upset about something. So now, after my stint in Chicago and then vet school, here I am retired, and I'm at this party of the Greene County Women in Sustainable Ag. Lisa Kievrist and Kara Carper were there. And then later that spring, in April, the county the census was done, and we gained a new district. The district was open, and there was no one that they knew was running. So Lisa and Kara called me up and say, do you want to run for office? And I did. And I won. No opposition. Thank you, but it helps to not have competition. But I'll tell you, it was the most wonderful experience to have. I learned a lot about how government works, all the stuff behind the scenes that you don't really even experience, the talk that goes on, the discussions about this and that in the township, how the county's doing the snow plowing, the road upkeep and that type of thing. It's basically, we determined how we spent your money. And so no one was really ever mad at us until the CAFO came along. That was this, Pinnacle Dairy was proposing to build a 5,800 dairy milking industry factory in Wisconsin. Greene County only had 4 before that, so this would be the 5th CAFO. And it was right next door to a wonderful family that has been part of the Greene County Women's Group for so long. And we started, they did Greene County Defending Our Farmland. And that just exploded into all whatnot. The Farm Aid, the talks, the tea, it was just incredible. Whoever knew. So then after that, I had the office for 6 years, or 3 terms. And there was competition the last time. I didn't win. And I'll tell you, that was kind of hard. But I also know when they tell you, you know, these guys want to get out of the office because they want to have someone come in because they're tired of doing it. I don't think that's true. Because I think they want to be in the office because that little sense of being on the county board brings you up a little level than the JQ public, because it sure hit me that way. So anyway, the biggest thing that I'm a strong feminist, I've always been, and I'll tell you, those gentlemen were not my friends. I've been known to be called an angry woman, so I have to be careful. We'll see what happens next time, if I'm going to be in office again. So, thank you.
So Roberta, we haven't known each other too long.
That's correct.
But you and Betty were the two that offered to tell a story tonight right off the bat.
Oh,
when I asked
okay,
you.
if you say so.
You were, and I appreciated
I remember
it.
a small amount of coercion. No,
So
encouragement, I would say.
So I'm going to learn as much about your farm as everybody else.
All right, great, thanks, Pat. My name is Roberta Barron, my husband and I, my husband's not here, but, well, I mean, he is in life, but not here. Own 80 acres between Blanchardville and Hollandale off Highway K. We moved from Madison after living in Madison for 30 years. So my story begins much earlier than that, and oops, I'm getting emotional. I was born in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, Dunn County, way up north. At the time, my mother and father actually lived in Kansas, but my mom was visiting, and I came along. Anyway, eventually we did end up living on our grandparents' farm in Russ County that was a mile from the nearest neighbor and 8 miles from the nearest town. And we took the bus to school, and my mother worked as a secretary for the schools up there, and I loved it. Our family wasn't quite as large as yours, Betty, but we had the same experiences of being able to run out the freedom of the woods and the farm in general. And maybe the lucky part for me is we really didn't have farm errands. We did, it was ending up being a hobby farm because my grandfather had had a heart attack, so everything was pretty much just sustainable. And we had gardens, and we were involved in that, and canning, and, you know, doing your own home cooking, and learning, you know, your do-it-yourself types of things as well. A little bit of a side to that, my grandfather had Swedish ancestry and built stone houses and barns and things like that. So the property he was pretty much built himself. I think it was about 160 acres. But up there, you know, the farming aspects of things are pretty meager, but it was wonderful.
Due to economic reasons, we ended up having to move to a big city to earn money so my mother could work for, take care of 6 kids and stuff like that. So we ended up moving to Racine, where my grandparents, my grandmother's family was, Sin City. Some people know it that way. It was good. There was good cultural training there, etc. For some reason, the city never really appealed to me. There was always a part of me that wanted in that wild, something about the country that never leaves, at least not me. It wasn't not my personality. I think had I gone to high school up there, that might have been different. I might have been longing for the big city, but I got put there before I wanted to be there. So anyway, the title of my story is You Can Take the Girl Out of the Country, but not the country out of the girl. In my situation, that's true. So anyway, grew up in Racine and then ended up going to college in Eau Claire, trying to get back to the country thing. And then life circumstances brought me back to big cities again. Ended up in Milwaukee area and then Madison, and met my, no farming or anything. Did kind of always keep the fingers in having something going on in the lawn, perennial garden or whatever. But after 30 years there and our kids going away, it's like we both wanted country property and ended up getting our property out here, which is lovely in the Driftless area, and so inspirational with the environment and the capabilities of the land and the beauty and the community, the people we live among. I lived in Madison for 30 years and didn't have the friends I have here. And not only that, we're like not just soil sisters, soul sisters, and brothers. So, anyway, what we do now is, and I guess some inspiration came to me when we moved out here. I wasn't planning to do anything commercial. Hopefully my time's not running out. But as I walked through the property, I saw, and then our plan was to build a cordwood masonry house, which we did do. It took 13 years to do it, 8 years living or working full-time in Madison and commuting. We moved in last May. We're having an open house June 9th from 1 to 3. So if anybody wants to come and see this 4,000 square foot thing that nobody else has, not exactly that way. There are other cordwood masonry houses. Come along. There'll be some before the sample. Anyway, when we first moved out there and the house wasn't built yet, we were living in our transitional housing there. I walked through the property and saw a bittersweet plant, which is when I was in college in Eau Claire. I was first time far away from the family. I had a certain amount of depression and was kind of sad, and I couldn't connect with people because my roommate had been there in the summer and rung up by a long distance phone bill, and I was not able to, nobody could, well, they could call me, but I couldn't call them, blah, blah, blah. So when I saw this bittersweet plant in November when everything's gray and dreary, and it was inspirational to me. It gave me that inspiration to keep going, to find brightness and beauty in a dark time. So walking through this property here, about that same time of year, and we'd had struggles getting in, we lived in the trailer for 6 months before going to the transitional housing, and things were always taking longer than you expect. So I was feeling a little down, and I see this bittersweet, and I'm like, that's it. So my inspiration, it was my inspiration again, and I started looking, thinking, I'll do, what's the market for flowers? Is anybody interested in local cut flowers, or local flowers? And I managed to serendipitously run into a group that a woman was organizing a group of flower growers. So we actually got into that. We were doing that for 10 years, and I actually loved it, but it got to be too much. But at the end of that, I discovered aronia. Has anyone here heard aronia? Quite a few people here know it, and you're probably more educated than most of the people I talk to about it. I tasted it in a fruit juice, and I was just won over, and I became an aronia evangelist, and we started growing. Oh, yeah, I didn't notice that. Okay. we started growing half an acre and learned that it's a native superfruit that has the highest antioxidant of any fruit, actually higher than any vegetable too, things that are higher are too, blah, blah, First crop, nobody knows what it is, what do you do with it? I took it to downtown restaurants, about 90% infused with an alcohol, and made a drink. And our friends, Cider Farm, were working with Yahara, so I talked to Nick and I said, would you work on a recipe with us? And he agreed to, so basing this off of a European recipe, which ironically we import more of that berry from overseas than we grow here, because they've discovered the health properties of it, rediscovered before we did. Even though the Indians used it medicinally, it got relegated to landscaping because of its tart, astringent, and puckery flavor. But anyway, with this renewed interest in health and healthy things and antioxidants, this berry wins the day. It doesn't win in the flavor category for a lot of people. I actually like it. But one of the ways then I thought, okay, what's palatable? This liqueur is, and if you don't want the alcoholic aspect of things, there's a cookbook on Amazon of 90 recipes for $9.95. That little picture there, that's what that is. I spearheaded that when I was in the board of the Midwest Writing Association, to show people there are many palatable ways to consume it outside of juice and jelly and bakery, etc. So, thank you for letting me tell my story.
It's so nice to see so many familiar faces in the audience, so I'm not quite as nervous as I would be maybe, but so, and seeing as I have a toddler and another one on the way, so I'm going to bless you with a Raffi song tonight, because that's pretty much what we have in the house, so. So the reason I chose the Raffi song was because I think it highlights some of the values that I grew up with as a kid, and I also value in my young family of 3, soon to be 4. I grew up with a large vegetable garden in Pennsylvania, some chickens and a few other pets, and we now run a small farm here in Wisconsin. And love and good food grown or raised by us, and clean air and clean water are some of the values that we hold in our family, just like the Raffi song. So that's another reason why I chose it. I wish we had more control in general over the quality of our air and water, but we definitely have more control over the quality and nutrition and the content of the food we eat, because we can grow and raise it ourselves, as you can see from some of the pictures that I put up here today. So I'm going to tell you a short story about earthworms to highlight some of the life lessons that you can learn from spending time in the garden, getting close to the soil, and learning about where your food comes from. With the help of the clean water and the clean air and the earthworms, we can do a lot, and we can grow a lot of healthy food. So that's one of the reasons why I'm enjoying farming now. So when I was about 3 or 4, this age of Charlie, I really loved to help my mom and dad in the garden, and I especially loved carrying my bucket of earthworms around while they were gardening. So I would collect the worms and I put them in a bucket, and I had my pet earthworms that I could just play with all day long in the garden. And so one summer, I decided that I was going to bring my family of earthworms in the house because we had to go in and I just couldn't let them go. So I brought them in the house and I started putting them in my little plastic Fisher-Price dollhouse because that's what I did every day. I played with my dollhouse. And my son now has the same dollhouse, but he's not putting worms in it, fortunately. So I remember vividly how I put all of them in the house and I was playing with them and I was having a great time. And Mom said, "It's time to go to bed, Nadia." So guess what I did? I tucked all my pet worms into their little plastic beds in the dollhouse, and I had the intention I was going to just pick up where I left off in the morning. My worm family would be there, and I would be able to play with them tomorrow. But to my dismay, as you can imagine, okay, I'd already played with them a lot, so they were kind of dried out already. So by the time I went downstairs the next day to enjoy my worms, I found them lifeless and shriveled in their beds. And I realized they had died, and I was pretty devastated. I have vivid memory, I was only 3 or 4, of coming down there and seeing them, and I was just crying, and my mom was sitting there with me in the playroom, and she immediately figured out why I was so upset. And I remember her saying, "Nadia, I'm so sorry your worms died. If we left them outside, they would have lived, because earthworms live in the soil. They don't live in a plastic house in our house." And I thought about that for a long time, many days, I was thinking about it, and I really that was my first experience with life and death, I guess, and I realized, gosh, I really love my worms, they should probably stay in the garden. I love that memory, and it came back to me recently because my mom and dad took my son Charlie fishing, and he's very different than I was when I was 3, and he was fascinated watching my mom rip the worms apart and stick them on the fishing hook. And so now, anytime he finds a worm, guess what he does? He rips them apart and looks at one and looks at the other, and then eventually they don't really do so well either. Well, let's say we have a different sense of appreciation for the earthworms, I guess. So, in conclusion, I would just like to say that I think for the love of all of our children and for the earth, and to be able to raise clean food or good food and have clean water and clean air, I think it's really important to take your kids, your grandkids, or your friends' kids out into nature, whether it's a park or a farm, because they are our future farmers or future caretakers of the planet, and we need more people to be interested in earthworms, I think.
A logging farm, a goat dairy farm. We've always been an organic farm, and we're an artisan cheesery, but mostly we're there I raise food for my family. We're a subsistence farm, and I raise an awful lot of things to make it through the year, from the sweet things to the eggs to everything else. So I grew up elsewhere. I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains in a very steep city, and in the city that I grew up in, every yard had fruit trees, and along the fences there were nut bushes and there were fruit bushes, and as a little kid I foraged like crazy, and every yard had a dovecote and a chicken coop, because people really had farms in their yards, and people were from different countries, so they spoke many different languages. And so as a little girl, I knew that what I wanted to be was a farmer. My family already made wine and already made sausage and grew all kinds of things, and we put them by. I love canning jars just about more than anything in the whole world. So when I was a little girl, girl, I decided I had to be a farmer, but those old people were dying out, and the traditions were being lost. Nobody wanted to do those things anymore, but I did. And so I came to Wisconsin, and I studied geology and soils, and I studied fluvial geomorphology, which is the study of river-shaped lands, which is what the driftless area is, a stream-shaped land. And so I learned all about it. And my work study job was to come out on the farms and survey streams. I was on the Pectatonica, I was on the Galena, I was on both forks of the Kickapoo River, I was on the Pine River, and I was on all these little streams and creeks. And what it meant was I got to go on farms. I not to go on farms, I'll start this. I even got to go to places like Hazel Green and Cuba City, and I got to go to small town cafes when this whole area was wall-to-wall dairy farms, and there were cheese factories everywhere, every half mile. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I got to watch the farmers with their cows, and I got to learn how to go in and out of pastures and over and around and through barbed wire fences. I got to learn how to move the cows with my voice. That was really fun. And then I would be down in the stream beds, and sometimes, crossing a stream, I would get stuck and I'd have to be pulled out because there's a certain kind of sand you watch for that you shouldn't step into. So I did that too. And then I also had to learn how to cross cornfields. If you've ever been in the middle of a cornfield in August, it was just total panic attacks for me until I learned how to deal with it. It was very, very difficult to learn how to deal with cornfields with the corn much taller than me. So I learned all those things. And I knew I really wanted more of it. And so I found a partner and found a place to live in Richland County. That's where I live now. I've lived there for over 30 years on the same farm. And one of the things that made me a powerful farm woman is being a folk dancer. And I know you're thinking, it's like, well, yeah, of course you work your muscles, your arms, your legs, and all of that. But the other piece, and you know this, Susie, is that some people could call cows in mountains, and then you could do things like, I'm going to go away from the microphone, hey! Hey! Okay, so you could do things like that. And so that became very useful because we have 95 acres in the deep hills. And it's not easy to find one another once in a while. It was just me and Felix at first. And so that's how I would call him. I'd say, hey, and he'd have to say, hey, back. Okay, so then we had a little boy. And the little boy was very, very lively. And the great thing was he loved wearing red. And he also liked to take off. And so I learned to dress him from head to toe in red. It was really useful. Year-round, I could see him out in the grass, I could see him out in the snow, I could see him all the time. And so when he was very little, he was a really smart kid, like 2 years old, I taught him that if I say, hey, he had to say, here, Mama, here, and he had to jump up and down until I could see where he was, because it would just be too easy to lose him. No neighbors on either side, because we live among collapsed farms, okay? Well, later those farms became vacationers' places. That's what they are now. We're the only people working with animals or anything like that. So then our second child came along 8 years later, and we had to come up with a system of calling everybody. So it went like this. If you were a child, I said, ho, ho, and the child had to call back. And if it was an adult calling an adult, it was, hey, hey, and that's how we got around with all that. And the neighbors, like, who've always been there, thought it was absolutely ridiculous. Like we had one neighbor who'd go around saying, he's ho and she's hey, He thought it was just ridiculous. But some of those same people in the neighborhood didn't think it was ridiculous later when they would do things like poach. And so in haunted times, and bring people into our hollow where it's steep hills, and they could use the guns that would go across the hills past our house. And this was before chronic wasting disease. And then there were people who were hiding things, and because we had vacationers on either side, they would disappear. But I knew where their cars were on the road. So then I would pull out my Hungarian repertoire. And so if I would walk up and down the road, I could be on my balcony and do this, and that would help. Or I would walk down the road and I'd do this. And I sing the whole song, okay? It's very loud. And also I would do, maybe Susie, you remember this. Now, let's say that if you go up and down the road when people are trying to be stealthy, they can't exactly go after the animals they're trying to get. And so it was kind of like flushing grouse or something like that, you know. So eventually, I see these people come back to their cars, kind of downcast, and they get in the cars and drive away. And I knew that I hit my mark, so that was really good. And then, let's see, and then there was a time when this kind of ability that I had actually saved my life. I should say a lot of farmers do whatever they can. They have to adapt to things every day, and they use everything that they possibly can. And so anything you've never done before, you're going to do on a farm. But also, one of the ways people have traditionally survived is that one person goes off the farm and works. And I worked as a school teacher. I worked at my country school teaching a double grade, and then I also taught in town. That is the survival. And it was very typical for women all these years to go and provide income for the farm. And we've also had lots of floods. I should explain, our farm is down in a hollow, and our house is near the bottom. Below us is a spring creek, and then it goes across flat land where we raise vegetables, and then it goes over the main creek, and then it goes up to the town road. Our road is gravel, and the town road is gravel, and we all live real poor, so the gravel doesn't get poured, and so we have lots of floods, and we have lots of trouble getting out at times. And one particular flood, June 1st, 2000, washed away all the gravel off our drive over the main stream. And what that meant was, it was a 10-foot drop, and all the gravel on top of the 6-foot culvert was gone, and all that was left was 2 I-beams. Now that was the last day I was supposed to teach, and by contract I had to be there, and I called the school district and I said, we got flooded and I have no way to get out. They said, you still have to be here. So Felix, I thought, okay, fine. I called someone to meet me at the mailbox who was heading to town. I put on my rubber boots, and I put on my big backpack, and I got garbage bags, because the reason why I had to go to town is every year we had to take our classrooms apart, and we had to bring everything home, and then we had to bring it back in the fall. That was part of the deal. So I got all my things, and I got in the car, I went to town. It was miserably hot, it was miserably wet, it was a miserable day. There's no air conditioning in the building. And so I came back at the end of the day, I was kind of frustrated. Now I forgot to mention something. We were building a cheesery. And so before this flood came, we had taken down one part of the barn, and there was a bulldozer and a hi-ho at our place, on our side of the creek. And that meant that we had to be the first farm that got fixed with a road before anybody could get out. So they were doing a temporary road, and I knew that that would happen. So I came back, I got to the mailbox, I looked down, and here is a dozer going up and down over the area where the culvert is, with a temporary road made of dirt. And he was going full blast, and he couldn't hear me or see me, and he is running a diesel machine. I can't be around diesel. And there's Felix across the creek in the bottomland on the diesel Deutz tractor. Okay, he can't hear me, and I want to get home. And I must say, I looked over there and I thought, I have a 6-year-old boy. He's not outside. That may mean he's in the house. What he was actually doing was, he was baking a cake from scratch and using the electric oven. I can tell you another time, but he did a fine job. From scratch. I mean, this is how the kid was. And so, but I didn't know that at the time. I knew my son wasn't around and all the stuff was going on, and I was hot and bothered. And so I dropped the bags with all my stuff, and it was raining, and I dropped my backpack, and I thought, I'm going to cross that creek. And it was high water. And so I went down to the creek, and I thought, and there was Felix up above me on the land, on the tractor, and I thought, okay, I'm getting across this creek. And I stepped down on what I thought was the coarse sand, but I forgot. That is the sinking sand. That is actually the silt, and it has this layer of coarse sand on top. So I stepped and I started to go down, and I realized where I was, and there was a willow tree hanging out over the water. So I threw myself into the willow tree and lost a boot in the process and hung onto the willow tree. So here I am, hanging out over the flooding waters. And Felix is up there, and the other machine's running right here on the culvert. So guess what I do? Cover your ears. I'm serious. Cover your ears. Hey! Okay. So I just did that for maybe like 30 seconds. And Felix, you know, he's driving on the tractor. He looks like this profile, you know. And all of a sudden, when he heard me, he looked down, and there I was, hanging onto the tree, with one arm waving and screaming. And so he left the tractor running, and he came down and stared. And then he came down, and he pulled me off the tree onto the side and then up the bank. And then he went back, and he has long arms, so he actually got the boot for me. And so I made it through just fine. Oh, I forgot to mention, I've even yelled like half a mile so that he stops the tractor up at the hay ground, because we've got hay up on the ridge. But anyway, I just wanted to say to you, there are times when you have to pull out every skill. As a farmer, you have to be adaptable. And in my case, it was folk dancing that saved my life. And made me a strong farmer.
I met Chris Marion at a Farmers Union Lobby Day in Madison about 4 or 5 years ago. And we had it was the middle of the dairy crisis. We've lost half the dairy farms in Wisconsin since 2009. And so I was there to talk to legislators about that. And I met this young woman who was so enthusiastic and just full of fun, and I want to do this, I want to do this. And we got to know each other and would see each other at Farmers Union events. And then when we sold our farm in 2014, I moved to Monroe just to be near some family and relatives I have down there. And I fell into this wonderful community of women, and one of its leaders was Chris Marion. She was the first person who sent me candy in the mail. She was one of the first people I sang with at karaoke at Farmers Union Convention.
True confessions.
And then we formed a group called Farmony. So she's one of my favorite people in the whole world. You may have seen her on TV running for state senate. My friend Chris Marion.
Well, that's a lot of tough acts to follow. I have lost a lot of kids, and they ran away from me, and I lost track of them, and I never thought to put them in red. That is really smart. I like that. But I've lost more tools than kids, and so I never buy a tool that doesn't have a red handle for the same reason. So I feel you, sister. I am not a storyteller. In fact, when my kids were little, they'd always ask my husband to tell them stories at night, because I would just lose the thread of a story, and I wanted to read them books instead, but then I sometimes fell asleep. So I'm not the storyteller in the family, and I want to come to you tonight, kind of as we're getting toward the conclusion of this amazing event. By the way, what about the view from Folklore Village when it's snowy? It's pretty fantastic. I want to come to you as a proud politician. Some of you, when I said that, probably felt kind of icky in your stomach. And this story is especially for you then. I got into politics out of love. And my love story is about my farm, and about my little tiny town, and about my frogs. And I want you to know that most people who go into politics at least start out of love of some sort. And undoubtedly, some people get off track, and things can get ugly. But I hope that if you remember one thing from my story tonight, it's that politics is rooted in love, in the desire to build culture and community and take care of people. So, for me, my farm story starts with an illness. I lived in Chicago after college. I lived in the suburbs, grew up climbing in trees and playing in creeks, and couldn't wait to get to the big city. And I moved to Chicago to go to school, and I was a reporter for a little while, then I worked in landscaping. And I raised 4 kids halfway in Chicago. But in my early 30s, I came down with really acute rheumatoid arthritis. So acute that I was in bed a lot, and I couldn't hold a coffee cup. And if you know me well, you know that is catastrophic. I couldn't hold a pencil or a toothbrush because I couldn't close my hands. I don't know where it came from. I excused it for many years. I was in a lot of bands. I thought maybe I'm drumming too much. I was a knitter. I thought maybe I was knitting too much. Do your fingers hurt? And I was gardening. I was doing a lot of landscaping. I thought I was doing that too much. But in the end, I realized it wasn't that I was doing these things. It was that I was sick. And so in the middle of that, my husband, who is from rural Missouri, always hated Chicago, came up to me in my bed and pitched the idea of moving, which he had pitched before, but I had never been into. But while I was in bed, I had been reading Wendell Berry. And if you've ever read Wendell Berry, you will understand what I'm talking about. I fell in love with the country and with rural places through reading his books. In some ways, it was falling back in love with my childhood, because in the suburbs at that time, you were kind of on the edge of farms. But I began to crave green spaces. And I really believe that if I could get somewhere where I was surrounded by green, and it wasn't limited by someone's garage or a power line or whatever, that I would feel better. I had no hope of ever really getting better. I just thought I would feel better. So we started looking, and we drove up from Chicago through Monroe, and we looked in Janesville for a while. We couldn't find anything in our price range. If I was going to move, I wasn't going to move to like a town. I was going to do something completely different. So we wanted acreage. And as we went west from Monroe, the bottom dropped out on the landscape, and we fell into the Driftless, a place I had never been before, and I teared up the moment. Some of you who have been with me for a while will laugh, but the moment I got to Carousel Farms, I started crying, because it's so beautiful there when you can see the hills and you can see the quilted farm fields and all the contours, and there's creeks in there, and there's trees, but then there's lots and lots of little farmhouses. And so I fell in love. I fell in love the moment we hit there, and we pretty much bought our place after seeing it one time. And after 2 years of farming, I didn't intend to farm, but I wanted to garden, and I worked on other farms. But while I was working on other farms, I started building a CSA on mine. After 2 years, I was off all of my medication. And I literally, yeah, it's amazing. Thank you, Driftless. I truly believe that I was healed by the view, like I felt drawn to, but also by the work, and by the water, and by the air, but also by the frogs. I live on a wetland, and I bet you have some wetland on your place, and right about now, it's deafening at night. You can't hear a thing. It's like they make you crazy, but they're awesome. I really worked hard to build my farm. Those of you who've built a farm from scratch, or even tried to farm vegetables, or any kind of farming, know that it's kind of a sun-up to sundown thing. It's very hard work. It's never done. And you're just at it all the time. But as I built my farm and got some stable employees, I began to look up a little bit from the ground and began to look around me and realize that my neighborhood wasn't doing so well. That we were losing farms, that barns were falling down. You know, to someone who doesn't come from farming, seeing barns falling down is somewhat disturbing and sad. You don't really get why it's like that, but you feel the heaviness of it. So I got involved with Wisconsin Farmers Union because I wanted to fight for this amazing lifestyle that really changed me and healed me. And so I started to pull together with the Soil Sisters and with Wisconsin Farmers Union, built a really big chapter here in the south central part of the state, and was feeling really good about it, getting a lot of kudos. I won a lot of awards through Farmers Union for membership. I was feeling pretty good. I was making friends with a lot of my neighbors who are conventional farmers, just feeling very at home in my place, which is so amazing. But one day I was out picking raspberries, and something jumped on me, and I thought it was one of those horrible Japanese beetles. But instead, it was a tree frog, one of my peepers. Peepers aren't often out at the time when I harvest raspberries, because this is beginning of fall, so it's a little weird, but I looked down, and that little frog was green. You know, they change, and it looked at me, and I looked at him, and I looked, and he looked, and I was just looking, and I really felt like I understood that in order for me to stay healthy and for my land to stay healthy and for this opportunity to stay, I needed to work with farmers upstream, downstream, upland, and we needed to work together to protect this incredible opportunity. And that was going to mean fighting for water protections. And I knew when I was looking at the frog that that was going to put me in a very delicate position with a lot of people. I knew that it might even compromise my love affair, my mutual love affair with Farmers Union, because at the time, fighting for water protections was a little bit contentious, and fighting against industrial agriculture was a little bit contentious. But I couldn't not do it because I had this love relationship with my land and with my frogs, and I was compelled to stand up and fight for us. And so I ended up getting on the county board that year, and starting kind of a giant, difficult conversation about water that has persisted to this day. And I ran for state senate, and I lost. But the month after I lost, the governor declared 2019 the year of clean drinking water. And the representative in my community is the head of the Drinking Water Task Force. And the guy I ran against, who for years I had dogged him to try and talk about water, now has water in every newsletter. Now I look at that and I think, I'm not sure what I think, but the fact is he's talking about water, and I couldn't even get him to talk about water before. So that is why I am a proud politician. I took a risk, I raised a shit ton of money, and it got spent on stuff I wish I could have spent that money on other things, and I will fight for that in another battle. But I did not die when I lost. And in fact, we moved the needle a ton in that campaign. And it's all about love for this place and for these people. And I really appreciate you all being here out of love for this place and these people, and I hope that you will remember that most politicians on both sides of the aisle started with a nugget. Maybe it wasn't a frog, but there's something that got them out of their comfort zone enough to take the risk to run for office. So.
Well, my dad was a farmer, and he loved farming. He loved the crops, he loved the cattle, he loved tallying the bushels of wheat from the cash crop that he would grow every year.
Walk this way if you need to wander. Yes, if you need to wander.
Okay. Oh my goodness sakes.
Sorry.
Anyway, he loved it, and he loved the cash crop that he raised. He loved tallying the wheat. And whenever he would tally the wheat in the summertime, he would save back a bushel or two to put into a burlap bag in a dusty corner of an old shed. Because you see, on Tuesdays, my mother would make her crippled, slow way out to that shed, and she would take from the top of the wheat her hand grinder that was nestled there, and she would clamp it on the workbench, and she would grind wheat into flour. Then she would make her way back into the house, and she'd make bread. And he loved the bread. Every meal, there'd be a slice or two cut into a great crumbly slabs and slathered with butter, and he would lift them to his mouth with his big farmer hands as though it were some offering to the gods of life. Those big hands, calloused, strong, and forever smeared with butter. He'd get it out his mouth, he'd lick it off his fingers. I kid you not, his place at the table was smeared with the grease of it. Oh, Dick, she'd say. Because my mother had a full-time job just keeping the old guy clean. And so the years went on. The sun the earth turning circles around the sun, the fresh, warm smell of the earth receiving the seed growing into wheat, the wheat into harvest, the harvest into flour, the flour into bread. Tuesdays yielding to Wednesdays, summer to fall, winter to spring, and the return of the smell of the earth again. Now today, it's Tuesday. There's that good smell of the earth, and the sun is rising to high noon, and I am in the farmhouse kitchen. I'm putting together the meal of the day. I've got his favorites resting in the oven, warming, a pot roast, mashed potatoes, gravy. I'm rummaging around the kitchen looking for something else to complete the meal. I find a can of peaches. I put one of each golden half in one bowl, in another bowl, put a little juice in on the top. It's good. I find a can of green beans. You and I know that the beans in this can are not green. And I know that down in the basement, in the freezer, there are several bags yet of the green beans she put up last summer. But he likes these beans. And this meal isn't so much about nutrition as it is about comfort. And then I find it. Half a loaf of her bread. Put it on the table. I cut 2 pieces. I leave the bread knife. He'll cut more as he goes along. And the butter. I can't forget the butter now, can I? And then this old man comes in from the field and he washes up, and he and I sit down at the table across from each other, just as we did so long ago. Only then, the sunlit kitchen was filled with the tumble of us all. And now, there's only silence hanging on the backs of empty chairs. And on one chair, there's a worn old sweater. But the food is here, and he will lead us in grace. He takes those hands again, and he weaves his gnarled fingers together. He anchors his elbows on the table, and he begins. Bless us, Lord, in these gifts from thy bounty. When he gets to the Amen, there's a silence, a long silence. And I finally sneak a peek, and I see that he's put his hands up in front of his face, his thumbs against his forehead, and he's working those fingers. The cracked nails and the grime of farming embedded into them. He's working to hold it all in. Finally, he takes his hands down. He surveys the table, but he doesn't begin to eat yet. He still has his elbows anchored on the table. He's hesitating. He's waiting for his daily reminder. Dick, elbows down. Today doesn't come. Today, by God, he doesn't have to take his elbows down off the table. But today, for some reason, known only to him, he does. We eat, We exchange pleasantries of the day. At one point, looking up, our eyes meet searching, and we both look away because the pain is just too great. We retreat to more talk of that and this. Finally, the meal is done, but we linger. He reaches across and cuts another slice of bread. He cuts it in half. He takes one, I take the other. We dig into the butter. Because you see now, we're not eating to fill a hunger in our bellies. We're eating to fill a hollow in our hearts. Finally, he just knows that meal cannot be held any longer. He takes those big hands and he pushes himself away from the table. The scrape of his chair across the floor mocks us with its hollow grind. And then he takes those big hands and he puts them on his knees and he pushes himself up. And that's when I hear his old no-nonsense voice. Enough of this! I gotta get to work. And then he looks sort of sidelong at me and says, I'm going up to the cemetery. I'm going to plant flowers. Then he finally looks at me and he says, you mind cleaning up? Flowers. And look at those hands again. Has he ever planted a flower? Those hands have seen the seasons. They know seeds and they know the soil. But flowers require delicacy. I wonder how those hands will manage. Where I sit, I watch him go out the door. The screen seems to shut more softly than usual. And I watch through the window. He opens a trunk and he starts to put in half a flat of withered petunias, shovel, a hoe, several gallon jugs of water. A good farmer wouldn't forget the water now, would he? Lowers the trunk, gets around behind the wheel, slowly turns the car in the driveway, and he rolls out towards the road. Now, any passing motorist is going to look at him and go, that's a nuisance old man driver in his old man car. His years old, impeccably kept, powder blue Lincoln Town Car. The one with the automatic windows that he loves to tease with the grandchildren about. But they can't see the hands on the wheel. They've had a good meal. They're full of resolve. And he is going up to the cemetery to plant flowers. He is going to handle this sorrow in his own way with his hands in the earth. I clear the table. I wash up the things. I wipe up the crumbs and the butter grease. I put everything away. I leave the bread out. There's enough for maybe 2 slices. And then there's the heel. When he gets back, excuse me, his spirit's going to be hungry. He'll help himself then. He's going to have a lot to chew on when he gets to that end piece. And then there's going to be the long days of summer and the harvest. And this year, there'll be no need to save back a bushel or 2 for an empty sack and an old shed. He hasn't said much. We children think we know what's going on. He's often bowed his head. We know he's counting the Tuesdays since she last made bread. And he's been saying to himself, working those tears into a whispered mantra, so be it. So be it. We children have heard those words. He has trained himself not only to say them, but to live them these 80-some years. So be it. As he rode a circle of grace through sick cattle, low milk prices, drought, torrential rains, taxes, and urban sprawl that even now is threatening his beloved land. So be it. He showed us how winter's dead white would come around to the green life of spring, and he did it not by some iron will, but by a sense of surrender and trust. When we would get worried about something, he'd say, "You're getting ahead of yourself. You're okay now. Things are going to be all right. They're going to turn out." And you know what? They always did. Does one gain such wisdom from the seeds of wheat? Is there sustenance for more than the body in a butter-slathered slice of homemade bread? Perhaps. And what of tomorrow's bread? It'll come pre-sliced. It'll be wrapped in plastic. He'll look forward to the shopping of it, though. Chance to tease with the girls at the deli. But I ask you, will it stick to his ribs? Will it stick to his soul? I have to leave. I have to leave so we both can face this in our own way. So I swat a few flies, I collect my things. As I walk out the door, the screen seems to shut more quietly than usual. It's going to be a long summer. He's going to be working and not getting ahead of himself. So be it, he's going to be saying. You know, maybe I don't need to worry about that store-bought bread, because he carries his bread of life here. I bend down, I pat the dog. I walk across the yard to my car. And it's then that I discover that my eyes are not big enough to hold all the beauty in this old man. And the tears begin to fall like grains of wheat out of a bag at harvest. I'm thankful for these tears. I've learned a lot these last 2 weeks. I'm thankful for their salt and their moisture, for their flavoring and moistening my own bread of life. I'm not ready yet, but maybe someday I will be able to say with the same fullness of being to anything that will come along, so be it. So be it. My mother, Rosemarie, suffered a stroke on Mother's Day while she was planting flowers. She never regained consciousness, and she passed on May 21st, 1991, but only after my father went to her and whispered in her ear, "Rose, we're going to be all right." So be it. My father, Richard, died in the same farmhouse where his father and his father before him had lived and died. It was November 21st, 1993. We buried him in the good earth on Thanksgiving Day, a day to honor the harvest and the harvester. Thank you.
I like to rise when the sun she rises early in the morning.